Alrighty then. Welcome back to the Crash Bang Boom podcast. I'm a little hoarse from yelling and screaming at the TV for 3 hours last night watching the Saints playoff game and ultimately them losing with 10 seconds left, which was just absolutely ridiculous. In any case, kicking off today's continuation of the New Orleans drummer series that I'll be doing for this podcast is an incredible drummer in Dan Caro, who is a real inspiration not only in the drumming world but in life. Dan is a burn survivor who at the age of 2 was involved in an accident resulting in 3rd and 4th degree burns over 80% of his body, and subsequently over 80 surgeries by the time he was 18 years old. But despite all odds stacked against him, Dan became not just a drummer but an incredible one at that. We get into the challenges of overcoming the initial limitations in the pursuit of drumming, at one point mentioning, and I quote, "What else seemed impossible? Let's play the drums. What else are you supposed to do when you don't have hands or fingers?" And how crazy of a realization is that, right? We go from drumming to Dan becoming an author and inspirational speaker, Dan's favorite drummers, studying with the great Johnny Vidacovich in New Orleans, some ghost stories, and Dan just being a general badass and seriously inspirational story. So kick back and get ready for a good one, y'all. Dan Caro, ladies and gents. Crash, bang, boom!
Crowds go mad with joy.
All right, I'm here with Dan Caro, a guy that I've known for a very long time. It's good seeing you, Dan. Good to catch up with you, man. I look forward to shooting some shit with you today, my man.
Likewise, Jody. It's been a long time, man.
It has been a long time, man. You know, I was driving over here. For those of you listening to this, I'm down in Louisiana, and the bridge that you drive over was at my childhood was the longest bridge in the world, right around 24 miles. And since then, apparently, China has built like 3.
Really?
One of which is like 100 miles long.
Wow.
They were like, no, we have long bridges.
Good for them.
They built the fucking longest bridges.
Nice, good for
But when
them.
I was a kid, it was the longest bridge in the world.
It's a
So
long bridge.
24 miles, it's a long-ass bridge to drive across. And that's what I was doing, and I was reminiscing about all sorts of strange stories and strange things. So we'll talk about some of that. But in any case, what's been going on, man? How you been?
Man, I've been great, dude. You know, just blessed with gigs and, you know, music opportunities and life, you know. So
Yeah.
I can't really ask for much more, man.
Absolutely.
Just enjoying life, man.
So I didn't realize it, Dan, until now that you and I both relocated to New York post-Katrina. You were there for a couple of years. You've done some moving around since. What was post-Katrina like for you, and how'd you end up in New York?
Well, post-Katrina life is, you know, something you ain't never going to forget. I'll tell you
Absolutely.
that. There's destruction everywhere.
Yeah.
Devastation everywhere. So I knew the road ahead was going to be long and tough to rebuild. And I have a little guilt about moving away.
Yeah.
And not being part of this, you know, the rebuild here in the city. But I ended up in Brooklyn because why not? I mean,
Right.
As New York's the shit, man.
Right.
You know? So I mean, why not go up there? And I'd been there as a visitor, you know, and I played in New York a few times prior to that experience. But Brooklyn just seemed like a pretty cool chill spot for a little while, so I could
Right.
figure some stuff out. And I had some friends up there as well, so some music buddies that went to school down here at Tulane and Loyola with me, and
Okay.
I worked with them a bunch. So that was just sort of a logical place for me to go.
Right. And then at some point, were you in Colorado for a while, for a stretch there?
Yeah, after New York, I came back home for a second. We had a situation in the family that needed people to get our attention. We all needed to be here for something, and came back and dealt with that for about 6 months or so. And I actually bought property and built a house, the one that we're sitting in right now, being interviewed, back in '08.
Oh, wow.
And as soon as it was done, I left. I didn't
Really?
even live in it. I never even lived in my home.
Damn.
So I moved to Colorado because life turns, man. Like, you expect the unexpected. Expect to not know what's around the corner. And always be ready to embrace it.
Right.
And I got a strange opportunity that I never envisioned myself in, which is writing a book, becoming an author, and doing keynote inspirational speaking. And I figured if I was going to write a book, I needed a different scenery, scenery. So I love the mountains,
Right.
and I wanted to go to a place that I could sort of just get lost in. And I had no expectations, and but I had a friend in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, who was an old music buddy of mine, and he said, "Why not come up here? You can hang out at the house as long as you need to, just to get away until you figure where you're gonna go." So I lived in Steamboat for the next a little over 2 years, and that's the greatest 2 years of my life, man.
Really?
The mountains and the skiing, and and I had gigs like crazy. I never believed that I would be gigs. I was working 3 days a week as a drummer in a mountain town, a ski town, with some good people.
Right.
You know, this organ player who played with the Tony Williams Lifetime for a little stint.
Damn.
And he played with the Headhunters for a stint.
Wow.
A guitar player who's a Berkeley grad and a Musicians Institute grad. Great stuff. Scarlett Matheny kind of vibe to him. And, we killed it up there. It was awesome.
That
was a
wild.
huge blessing that I would have never imagined myself going to a mountain town, working with those level guys.
Yeah, that's wild.
And skiing. It was like a free vacation, pretty much. I was getting paid to live there and ski. And I wrote a book, and I got to go all over the world doing speaking. And it was just something that I still wish I could have those 2 years back. But,
damn, man.
and after that, it didn't end there. On my speaking tour, I met somebody, an ex of mine, out in California, and relocated to San Francisco.
Yeah.
Got married, and she and I had about a 5-year run, you know, and out in California, in San Francisco, and kind of became domestic Dan.
Right.
Gigs were not as abundant as I imagined they would be. I had toured through San Francisco many times.
Right.
In my early 20s, and I thought San Francisco was going to be different when I lived there. It was just, I had gigs when I was touring, but the gigs were hard to come by when I lived there. And just the price of the city is ridiculous.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, after 5 years and my ex and I split up, I moved back home. Yeah. New Orleans had totally rebuilt itself on a level that I didn't understand. And people were like, man, the gigs are more than you've ever had in your life. There's just so many new venues, so many new musicians. You'd be a fool not to come back home. Yeah. So, and being creatively starved for 5 years, pretty much. I mean, I had gigs, but not the frequency that we have down here. Right. I needed to come back and just sort of reroute myself. And man, 2 years later, I'm working every day. I mean, I gig constantly.
Right. Having been gone for those years and coming back, what are some of the differences that you noticed in returning?
Well, first of all, the number of music venues. Right. I mean, I remember when Frenchman Street had like Cafe Brazil and the Dream Palace. And I always put the Dragon's Den in that mix too, even though it's technically not on Frenchman.
Absolutely.
But that was there, and then you had Snug Harbor, right? Right. DBA wasn't even there.
Right, exactly.
Spotted Cat wasn't there. Right. Right? And I watched those clubs develop, and we were the first bands to play in those clubs. Right. Now, those are just the old clubs. They got many new clubs down there, and there's so many musicians all over the place. Yeah. It's almost like a new Bourbon Street type place. So the gigs, the number of gigs, the number of musicians, just, man, and it's welcoming, you know.
Yeah.
That's what I loved about this place always. But when I returned, even though I was a local, you know, because I grew up around here, it was like I was sort of an outsider because there was a younger group of musicians that I was trying to get back in with,
Right.
that I didn't know.
Yeah.
So, you know, they were welcoming to me, you know, just like I would be to anybody coming into the town. So
Right.
it was just, you know, just different personalities, different characters, you know. New Orleans is full of characters, you know,
Right.
like every major city has their characters. Well, there's some new characters in town too.
Right.
Which is awesome because it just shows progress and it shows that we're living our lives, man, you
Yeah.
know? Because at any time it could be gone.
Ain't that the truth?
100%.
Well, man, for people who don't know your story, you mentioned your book. We'll talk a little bit about that. Tell the people a little bit about your backstory and just a little bit of that, if you could.
Sure, man. Well, I'm a burn survivor. I was in a garage fire when I was 2 years old. And it was a pretty bad situation for a lot of years. And lots of rehab.
Yeah.
Surgeries, 80 surgeries.
Jesus.
It was just, you know, it was a tough childhood. You know,
I'll say.
Not just because of the, you know, I lost my hands and fingers, and it's not just because of that, but, you know, growing up physically scarred,
Yeah.
visibly physically scarred on your face and on your arms, wherever your skin is exposed. I mean, that's hard for people to digest. So you're always dealing with an emotional side of it too.
Fuck yeah.
With image and growing up as kids, there's a lot of bullies. And it's not just the kids, there's older people who are just totally ignorant and stupid and making an ass out of themselves. So growing up, I had to develop a thick skin, you know, to deal with that. So, developing, you know, social skills and physical skills, because when you don't have hands and fingers, man, it's tough to do normal stuff, man.
Oh,
like
absolutely.
tying your shoes, brushing your teeth, eating food. It's tough. I mean, you know, I like fried chicken, you know. It's like, I want to use my hands to get up in there, man. Well, you know what? It's hard. I have to come up with my own techniques, man.
Right.
So, it was exciting. As much as it was difficult,
Right.
it was super exciting too, because I became competitive with myself primarily, but also with my peers.
Yeah.
Because if they could do something, I put it upon myself to be able to achieve the same tasks that they did.
Right.
And if they were athletes, I'm going to be an athlete. If
Yeah.
they were a musician, I'm going to be a musician. You know what I mean? So I still carry that competitive spirit with me.
Right.
And not just with them, but with myself. If I did this yesterday, then I've got to excel a little bit more today. I got to do a little bit more today. And it just kept me growing. And it felt good.
Yeah.
It was very satisfactory to me that I knew I was achieving normal life goals that everybody goes through,
Yeah.
in spite of my challenges.
Right.
So, and kicking ass kind of along the way.
No
too.
doubt.
I mean, you know, not to really pride myself too much, but
Oh, go for it.
I worked so hard to overcome this shit
Oh, yeah.
that I better be good at what I do, because, man, I put in hundreds of thousands of hours, life and blood and sweat and tears,
Right.
just to do the things that most people take for granted. So I rock tying my shoes. I rock putting a zipper on my jacket together. I
Right.
rock that shit.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of that.
Fuck yeah.
That's huge. So then, you know, I mean, you know, life happens and we grow up, and now what else is there that's impossible that I can tackle? You
Yeah.
know? Why not play drums, man?
Unbelievable.
Are you kidding me? What the hell are you supposed to do when you don't have hands and fingers? You know, go pout and shit? Hell no, man. We're going to rock the drums now.
Right.
We're going to see what really is possible or impossible.
Right.
And I don't believe in impossibility, Jody.
Yeah, I hear you.
I think that anything's possible. You just got to be willing to put the time in, man. That's really all it takes, is time.
Right.
As long as you commit yourself physically to a task, you'll attain it at some level in time. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I had to learn as a real young kid.
Wow. Well, now I guess when you had the idea, was there any particular moment where the drums just shined like a beacon, like?
Man, always,
And
dude.
you're always attracted to the instrument.
You know, we got Mardi Gras and marching bands and stuff. You hear those drums miles down the street.
It's a
Are you kidding me?
drum-centric town, for
It's
sure.
crazy. I don't know why everybody's not a drummer here. But you know what? It's cool. We've probably got more drummers per capita in New Orleans than probably anywhere else in the
It
world.
sure seems like it.
I mean, I know 1,000 drummers here, man, for real. I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy. But
Yeah.
that's what attracted me initially.
Yeah.
Just seeing that and hearing that. There was energy in the crowds that gathered along the parade route. They love it.
Right.
They love the drums.
Yeah.
Even when the band's not playing a song, the drums are playing their cadence.
That's right.
And the people are still dancing.
That's right.
Just to some drum cadence. And it's so powerful. It just moves you. It's like one of the most inspiring things I think a kid experiences in and around New Orleans is parade drums. So I had always remembered that energy that I felt. And then as I got older, I was listening to music more intensely than I had prior, because my ears were starting to develop and learning a little bit more complex stuff and learning how to get into more abstract things. I would start inquiring to my dad, who was also a musician, and my two older brothers, who were also musicians, about the rhythms. It just is intriguing to me how these different instruments can combine while they're playing different things to make music.
Right.
And that was interesting to me. And I'm 12 years old, creating these philosophical thoughts about that. I mean, people don't think about that shit.
Right.
Not at 12.
No.
Well, I do, because I'm an extremely analytical person, and I'm crazy. But,
Right.
But I love it, and they did their best to explain it. In elementary school terms, kind of, so I could understand these real serious concepts that, and ultimately I would go to school for and all that stuff. But yeah, that was basically the how it all happened.
Now, once you realized that it was an instrument that you wanted to pursue, there was obviously a physical challenge of figuring out how to enact that and follow it. So how did you get around that?
Right. Again, reminder, no hands, no fingers and stuff, it's tough. And drums, as we know, are very physical.
Yes.
It's a physical thing. You're this brute that's back up there. It reminds me of the opening scene in 2001 Space Odyssey. Remember where the monkey finds the bone?
Right.
And there's a skull there, and he starts to hit it.
Yeah.
And he crushes the skull. That's kind of what we are.
Right.
I mean, we can do it with sophistication and delicacy, but I mean, when we play rock and roll, we hitting the damn drums.
Absolutely.
I mean, John Bonham is one of my favorite drummers, and he hits.
Yeah.
And guess what?
Yeah.
I hit too. So yeah, there was a major physical challenge. I have a reconstructed thumb in one of my hands. Well, both my hands, but only one of them works. So, and there's barely enough gap between my reconstructed thumb and the other mass of my stump, or whatever you want to call it. So with some stick grip tape, I use some of that grip tape, that rubbery kind of stuff. I would just work doing very basic rhythmic exercise, eighth note exercises, endurance exercises, and I would also try to crush Skittles with this thing. And I only crushed one in my life, and I think it just heated up because of the hand. It gets hot after a while, and it just finally crushed.
Yeah.
But I would do that every day
Really?
for hours. Whenever I was in class or in school or in the car, I would grab a Skittle and try to crush it just to build the strength, because I don't have the hand or the fingers to wrap around a stick.
Right.
And yeah, everybody drops a stick from time to time, but I drop a stick every stroke.
Right.
That's how it started for me.
Right.
So how the hell am I going to deal with this without using some apparatus?
Right.
So it just took a lot of time. Like I said, it's time, commitment and time and practice and will, and you're going to do it. So that's what it took on the left hand. The right hand, however, was way more difficult, because though I do have a reconstructed thumb, it doesn't work. It's just there's not enough mass on that stump, the end of my arm, the hand, or whatever you want to call it, to grip a stick. So I needed an external apparatus in order to make this hand functional. So after lots of experimentation with some ridiculous things, those cable ties, those plastic cable
Right.
ties. Which, that was stupid because it's basically just razor blading,
Oh,
cutting
man.
my damn wrist to pieces.
Uh-oh.
I tried that. I tried bowling gloves because I thought you needed a very stiff thing that held the stick on tight, but that's not true at all. The
Right.
stiffer you are, the worse drummer you are.
Right.
And then I tried duct tape just as something, and that's stupid too because it just rips the shit out of you. And rope, I tried super glue,
Jesus.
everything, man.
Everything.
Everything. It's all kids, it's stupid.
Right.
I'm not using my brain right.
Yeah.
And then I have a younger brother too, and he was I think 2 or 3, maybe 4 when I started playing drums. And he had some toys thrown on the ground, and within the pile of toys, I saw this wristband. It's like a sweatband, like a tennis wristband. And I thought about it, and I said, man, everything that I tried hurt. So I need something soft.
Right.
But I need it firm and rigid because you still have to hit with volume and be able to do rolls and stuff. So I put the wristband on. Obviously, it's too loose, just a sweatband. You couldn't. And then I saw a pile of rubber bands right next to the toys on a desk. There was a desk there with a pile of rubber bands. So let me try to put some rubber bands on top of the wristband. And immediately, it was a life-changing moment.
Whoa.
It was like the lights immediately turned on. And now, the hand that's pretty much worthless became easy.
Right.
Because I had stability, I had firmness, and I had looseness all at the same time with the wristband and rubber bands.
Yeah.
I just needed to develop technique, right? The left hand now needed to catch up
Right.
to the right hand. So, and I'm left-handed, I think by necessity, because that reconstructed thumb was all I have to live and to do normal stuff with. But when it came to drums, now I'm sort of right-hand dominant. But I still set up the kit left-handed.
Strange.
It's kind of weird. But I am too. So, expect that out of me.
Absolutely.
The more challenging it is, I'm going to do it.
When you had that realization that you were going to be able to play drums, did it feel as though at that moment also that maybe did you feel like you had a different purpose in life as well? So it was not only you had overcome the physical thing, but it was also like I have a whole new avenue in life as well now.
Yes, sir. That's a perfect way to put it. It totally was a whole new direction.
Yeah.
I had the conviction from the first moment.
Yeah.
I knew this was going to work with that wristband.
Right.
Once that wristband came on, it was like it's like Bruce Banner turning into the Hulk.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it's such. That's how dramatically different life was with that wristband on my wrist.
Whoa.
It was that intense.
Wow.
And it just took off. I mean, I committed everything I had to music from that point on.
Yeah.
There was no moment that I wasn't either physically working at it or mentally working at it. And it never stopped for years, all through high school and even in college. It just never stopped.
Your parents must have been excited for you, but on the same note, were they like, Jesus, he picked the loudest instrument possible to be banging away in the house?
Yep. My dad was cool with it, because he worked a lot. He was out of the house most of the day. And my mom, though, she gave me a 3-hour window every day that I could actually play on a drum, whether it's a snare drum or a kit.
Yeah.
So I had to get creative with practice early on, in my life, because I only had a 3-hour window to play. 3 hours when you're 12 years old.
Right.
If you really want it, that's not enough, man.
Right.
So, and I mean, I'm playing along to records like some of my favorite drummers and music, and I'm trying to learn songs, and here I am, door beaten down by my mom saying, you gotta shut up now. You're capped, you're done. So what do? Well, you put headphones on and you start practicing on a pillow or a mattress or your knees or or a practice pad. One of the practice methods that I picked up on early to develop better technique was practicing on like a down pillow.
Right.
Not even like a regular pillow, a down pillow that has absolutely no rebound. It's almost to the point where it just grabs and holds your stick.
Right.
So you have to work to pick the stick back up.
Right.
And it's great. The best thing you can possibly do for yourself.
Wow.
Practice on a down pillow for hours and hours and hours and days and years and years and decades, and you'll be killing.
Right.
You'll be killing. Your technique will be flawless, and you'll be able to do endurance forever. You can play gigs. We do 6-hour gigs sometimes, 8-hour gigs sometimes down here.
Damn, dude.
No breaks sometimes.
Wow.
That doesn't matter.
Right.
We're built. I'm built that way now because I worked so hard developing those techniques when I was young.
Damn, dude. When you were first playing along with records, who was one of the drummers that really stuck out to you, and maybe someone that you're still a big fan of to this day?
Danny Sarafine from Chicago.
No shit.
Original drummer for Chicago. Chicago's my favorite band. Back from 1967 when they came out, all the way through probably, I want to say, around 77.
Yeah.
That's when they started to take a decline as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
But those first 7-8 records, man, or 10 records actually, were killing. Great drums, man. Super inspirational to me. Plus we shared a name.
Right.
Danny Caro, Danny Sarafine,
Right.
So I thought that was really cool. And I liked how he interacted with the band. Chicago, a lot of folks know Chicago in their 80s era, which is all their love ballads and all that stuff, their sappy stuff. But back in the 70s and late 60s, man, they were a rock band, man. It was killing. I loved it.
Big horn section.
Horns,
massive
awesome
sounds.
Yeah, man. Very composed stuff. Awesome stuff. Orchestrations. But the drums and the bass, believe it or not, Peter Cetera is a killing bass player.
Right.
The way those guys pushed the band was phenomenal, man. I never heard anything like it since. Never heard anything like it prior to that.
Right.
Still, nobody beats those guys.
No shit.
In my opinion, that's the greatest.
That's a first, man. I've never had anyone ask this similar questions as to that one, and that Chicago is the first. So congrats, Dan. You get a prize. We're going to listen to Chicago after this.
Hell yeah, man.
Once you start getting out, how were some of the first gigs? How did those first gigs go for you? Getting out and playing and trying to do the thing, so to speak.
First gig I played was 1 year, almost to the date, that I picked up the sticks.
Really?
Yeah. At Mandeville High School my freshman year.
Yeah.
There was a battle of bands, and there was 2 school assemblies because the school was so big. They couldn't fit everybody into one common area, so they split the school in half. So we did 2 assemblies, and one of the English teachers was, he was in bands when he was younger, and we used him, and we basically created the same lineup as Chicago did, and we played Chicago songs.
No way.
And it was great. So first assembly was 1,000 people, second assembly was 1,000 people. My first gigs were to 1,000 people.
That's amazing.
And then immediately after that, my brother and I worked well together. He was a trombone player at the time. And he loved our connection, and we found some other guys at Mandeville High to start a little quartet, acoustic-driven rock, and we started gigging, man, right away. So I was 13 when I started playing out.
Wow, man. So then, and at some point you ended up. Did you go to? Did you study with Johnny Vidacovich?
I did. Yeah, Johnny was actually the last teacher I studied with.
Okay.
I have 7 teachers that I studied with.
Wow.
But Johnny was the final. And it's interesting because we didn't really study. We just talked about life.
Right.
And I learned more from him than all of the other 6 combined.
Really?
Okay? Just talking about life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I met Johnny when I went to Loyola. And we studied I was there for 2 years.
Yeah.
I went to some other schools too, but where I met Johnny was at Loyola.
Wow.
And we talked for 2 years.
That's awesome.
I think we only played drums for about a total of 3 minutes.
Are
The
you
very
serious?
first lesson, because, we played to a Bach Brandenburg concerto. What is that, right? So,
Yeah, what the
we
hell?
don't play drums to that. Well,
Right.
we did.
Right.
And it's weird because Johnny and I were playing head to head. Because
Right.
when you're left-handed and you're talking to a right-handed drummer, or teaching a right-handed or a right-handed teaching a left-handed, you can set your kits up mirror image of
Right.
each other, and everything is exact mirror image.
Right.
So that's what Johnny did with me. And I guess he was expecting that it was going to be I was a typical student, right?
Uh-huh.
But I already had lots of gigs under my belt by then. I was
Right.
already working with faculty members from the other universities that I went to.
Yeah.
I was already a veteran pretty much. I was young,
Yeah.
but I was
Seasoned.
gigging nearly every day, even in college.
Yeah.
And I guess Johnny picked up on that, and he knew that I was educated already, and I already had chops. I already had all the skill sets. So it was just more abstract concepts and philosophical stuff, like why are you drumming? Like what's the meaning of what you're doing?
Right.
Like why would you even put a groove like this at all on this song? Why would just stuff like that? That it's more emotional based. It's more like life that's moving you to do something, not technical. So
Wow.
So I think Johnny dug that about me, and after we had that connection on the Brandenburg Concerto for 3 minutes, that's it. He said, "All right, we're done, man." He goes, "We're done." He goes, "I do want to stress one thing to you." He goes, "Don't listen to any more drummers. You've already got it. You can sound like Tony Williams. You can sound like Elvin Jones. You can sound like Danny Sarafine. You've already achieved all that.
Right.
But why don't you sound like Dan Caro? Why are you trying to sound like other people? So stop listening to the other people. Start listening to yourself. And more importantly, start listening to the other guys on the bandstand. Because that's where you're going to draw your inspiration from. And don't think. Just react. Play. Just play.
Damn. It's like going to see a fucking shaman.
Pretty much, man. And you know what? Everybody that I know that studied with Johnny, at a high level,
Yeah.
pretty much says the same thing. Same type of thing.
Wow.
He is very much like a shaman, a music shaman, and
Yeah.
even like a life guy, because that dude's got a lot of miles, man.
Yes.
Got a lot of miles, man.
Absolutely. At one point, going back, I guess, to the book, once you had the offer, did you approach anyone about writing the book, or did someone approach you and then you thought, I can do this? How did that go down?
Yeah, that was totally unexpected. I was having a pizza at Pizza Man.
My favorite pizza in the world. I swear. It's my favorite.
It's the best. And New York, but down here, that's
Honestly, dude, it's my favorite even out of New York.
Oh,
Pizza
wow.
Man is like world class to me.
Pizza Man kills for sure. But
Yeah.
with my friend Benny D. Remember Benny D?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we are sitting in Pizza Man, drinking a pitcher of Abita, and we're eating a pizza. And this woman walks in. Her name's Tiffany. It's an old childhood friend of Benny's. And she walks in. "Hey, this is Dan. This is Tiffany, blah, blah, blah. Hey, what do you do?" "Oh, I live in Maui." She lived in Maui. "I work for this guy who, he's a big author and stuff." "What do you do?" "I'm a musician." "No, you look like you have a story to tell." "Yeah, I'm a burn survivor, blah, blah, blah." So she says, "I'd like you to meet my boss." She was this guy's personal assistant.
Just total random encounter.
That guy happened to be Wayne Dyer, who I think he sold like 150 million books. He's got like 38 best-selling New York bestseller books.
Whoa.
He's considered the father of motivational speaking, although he'd like it to be inspirational speaking. He's
Right.
passed on now.
Oh, man.
2 or 3 years ago. But his most successful book called The Power of Intention. And I just kind of put it out into the universe that I'd like to meet this guy. Not even 2 weeks later, his assistant walks into my life, and I go to Tampa a month after that, where he's doing a seminar, connect with him. 1 month after that, I'm doing a gig with him in Phoenix, Arizona.
Whoa.
We're talking on the same stage. 1 month after that, I'm on his annual PBS 3-hour special, where he basically gives a talk about the book that he currently wrote. And I was a guest on that program, and it always happens during the fund drives. So it's a big, huge fundraiser for PBS. Talking national television, hundreds of millions of people all over. And that's when the book deal came.
Whoa.
So it just boom, boom, boom. Everything just sort of happened immediately. And the president of the publisher Hay House, which is where Wayne was published with and where I'm published with, met with me right after that show and basically already had a contract written.
Whoa.
Handed it to me and said, "What do you think?" And I was like, "A book?" I was in school. I went to some universities and I had to write some papers, but a book's not like a term paper or like a thesis. It's, I mean, I guess a thesis is a book, but I've never written anything like this. I had no intention, no ambition to write a book.
Right.
I was only 28 at the time,
Yeah.
29 maybe.
Yeah.
I know I had a lot of life lived because all my struggles as a child.
Yeah.
But man, I was 29. I don't have the years. I don't have the wisdom and experience to write a book.
Right.
That was what was in my head. And Wayne basically looks at me and he goes, "Are you stupid? This is a huge deal for you, man." He goes, "I'm in the industry. I'm at the top of the industry."
Yeah.
He goes, "I've never seen a deal like this before. This is the biggest first-time author deal I've ever seen in the whole industry." And I was like, "Oh, really?"
No pressure there.
Yeah, okay, well, I guess I will take the deal. How do I do this? And Wayne's like, "Well, we got a co-writer with me. We're going to get you a co-writer." You know, because, I mean, I learned some secrets and stuff. Like 90% of authors, even the best of the best, Stephen King, John Grisham, all those guys, they all have co-authors too.
Right.
You know, the ghostwriters or whatever, people that help them,
Yeah.
you know, to get over the humps and stuff.
Absolutely.
So they paired me with this guy that was phenomenal. And strangely enough, too, right after I read The Power of Intention, the Wayne's book that I fell in love with, I read one of my co-writers' books to follow that book up right away. And I sort of put a little intention out to the universe, and I said, if I ever chose to write a book, I would want to do it with this guy.
Unbelievable.
Steve Irwin. And guess what? That's in the contract. Steve Irwin is your co-writer. Are you kidding me? So it's like everything just sort of happened at the right time in the exact way it needed to happen all at once. And it was like everything I wanted all at the same time. Now, here's what happened, to elaborate a little further.
Sure.
That changed my life completely. Music took a backseat.
Right.
Because now I've got to promote the book and go on speaking tours, and that was just a totally different experience.
Oh, man.
Now I'm a solo act, not behind the drums. For the first time, I've got a microphone in front of me, in front of my mouth, not on my snare drum and my cymbals.
Yeah.
Okay? Now it's in front of my face.
Under lights, people staring at you. Yeah.
Thousands of people. My first speaking event was in front of 10,000 people.
Damn, dude.
And I think my smallest speaking event, big, public speaking events, was in front of, I think, 1,500 people.
Damn,
so
dude.
It was immediately thrust, just like the music.
Right.
First gig was in front of 1,000 people, back-to-back gigs, 2,000 total. First gig, 10,000 people.
Damn.
Boom, big time. You know what, man? When you're thrust into that lifestyle, in like that quick, 0 to hero, sometimes it's a little tough to deal with.
Oh, I guarantee it.
When you're getting travel, you're flown all over the world. You're first class everywhere. You got to do publicity events, marketing events. You got to do interviews. You got to do meet and greets. You got to do VIP dinners. Everything, man. It's a lifestyle that I wasn't ready for.
Right.
Because when we're working club gigs, playing drums until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, hopefully walking out the door with $100.
Right.
that's all I ever knew. You know, there might be 50, 100 people in the club. I mean, that's cool.
Yeah.
You know, but when you got 10,000 people and every eye in that place and every ear in that place is watching and listening to every move and every statement you make, you better say the right stuff.
Oh, God. Once again, no pressure.
No pressure, right?
Oh, God.
Man, it was full of pressure, dude. It was the worst. The worst feelings was like when I was being introduced. You know, because you're off to the side of the stage, you're right behind the little curtain, and they're giving the introduction. Man, your heart is literally like those Looney Tunes commercials where
pouncing out of your chest.
The heart is like literally pouncing out of your chest. Yeah, for sure. And man, when you walk out on there, you better act like you're confident, and you better not be nervous because they eat that up, man. Right. They'll have you for dinner. So you gotta become a machine. So, you know, all of that stuff was a different type of thing. And I never scripted. I always improvised.
Really?
I didn't even have speaking points outlined. Because, I mean, basically I'm just telling my story and I'm sort of just sharing how things worked out and how they can work out for you too. So it was sort of an inspirational thing that I was doing. So, and I know my subject extremely well because it's me. You know?
Right.
But, you know, I work best in those situations.
Yeah.
Where I don't prepare and I just react. Because if the audience isn't buying what you're saying and you've got a script, you're stuck.
Absolutely.
You can't change. You can't work your way out of it.
Yeah.
If you're improvising, if it's not working, change the subject.
Right.
So I love that. But, you know, it took a second to develop that. But, you know, for about 5-6 years, I was full-time doing speaking gigs.
Wow.
And I wasn't really doing much music.
Yeah.
I played drums on the speaking gig. I always had a kit set up. I would do a solo at the end, just sort of a big thing.
Yeah.
And the crowd went nuts, man. It was great. But no band, man.
Wow.
That's weird. No band.
Whoa. Yeah. That's intense, man. You've had an intense life, Dan Caro.
It's cool, man. It's a good life. You know, it is intense, but it's good, man.
Yeah.
I love it.
Unbelievable. Totally a sort of off topic question, but my buddy that I'm staying with in New Orleans, when I would come into town from New York, I would stay with him, and I was going to ask you, have you ever seen or experienced a ghost before?
A ghost? You know what? I don't know.
Well, I have a weird one, and it's also in the end pretty hilarious. My buddy, he would run down his stairs and like crash into the front door to answer it. And so I was downstairs sleeping. It's a 2-story house. And I heard someone run down the stairs and like crash against the door. And I was like, oh, I guess he's up right now. So I got out of bed and I looked. No one was there. And I looked around downstairs. No one was there. So I walked up the stairs. House is empty. He's in bed totally asleep. So I woke his ass up and I said, I'm sorry, dude, but I'm getting in the fucking bed with you right now because I'm not going back downstairs. There's a goddamn ghost running through this house.
Man, that's crazy, dude. But, you know, being in this area too, right, there's lots of ghost stories. New Orleans is very haunted, right?
Right.
It's an extremely old city.
Yeah.
But on my property, just outside under these oak trees right here, there's a statue, if you can see right out there. And I mean, I know you can't see on the podcast here, but apparently there are 2 Carmelite nuns buried under that statue.
Are you serious?
This place, this is legend, okay? This is what I was told. And I'm not sure if I think it could be true, okay? This is a very unique piece of land in the neighborhood. Because I've got these really old oak trees, and there aren't many of these around this region. This was native territory prior to, you know, European settlements down here. And even at the turn of the century, there was still a heavy native population in this particular neighborhood,
right.
this area back here. So this was a ceremonial ground, legend has it. And these nuns would come here as missionaries to help, you know, and feed and clothe and sort of bring God to these to these natives, and they became well respected by the native people. And when they died, apparently the natives wanted to honor them, and they were buried here, and they had the approval of the convent, I suppose, to do it. Now that's legend, but there is an energy out on this piece of land that is extremely powerful. I never felt it anywhere outside of Steamboat Springs. So, and I meditated on this ground prior to buying the lot and building the house. I wanted to make sure this was the right place. And I felt a connection, a spiritual connection to the land. And it was sacred. It was something that was sacred.
Whoa.
So it's not necessarily a ghost, but it's definitely something supernatural.
Right.
Right?
That's amazing, man.
But your story is crazy. That was crazy.
It was so freaky, man. For those of you listening to this that are trying to figure out what area we're talking about Dan, I guess this is more or less Abita Springs on the North Shore across Lake Pontchartrain, Long Bridge, like I was talking about. And it's where I went to junior high school, and also they're in St. Tammany Parish, which is mostly all states have counties, but in Louisiana we have parishes. Only Jamaica has that apparently. But there is a thing called the St. Tammany Trace, which was at one time a railroad, and they turned that into a biking path that goes throughout the parish. And when I was just driving over that just now, I was reminded of a crazy story where there was this guy that I knew that lived on the like right next door to the railroad tracks in a trailer, and he had a sort of a truck that was cut in half, and the wheelbase was super shortened, and he called it the Frog, and it didn't have seats, but it had like milk crates. And when it was still an active railroad, we went driving down the railroad in this crazy ass truck with no seats, with holes in the floorboard so you could see the rocks in the trail. And I remember asking him, dude, is there a train going to come down this? And he was like, I don't think so. So that is one of the stories that I had forgotten about forever. And just coming over what is now the St. Tammany Trace used to be the railroad, I was reminded of the time that I went flying down it in some sort of redneck vehicle.
That's pretty redneck.
What else? Going into 2018, man. First of all, who are you playing with right now, and what do you have going on into the new year?
Man, so I have a couple of bands that I'm working with right now. Plus, I freelance. So I'm like a hired gun. My primary groups right now are John Lisi and Delta Funk. And the Jamie Lynn Vessels band. I've been working with her a lot these days. So we've got a bunch of gigs down in New Orleans, and a lot of them are on Frenchman Street. Working a couple Bergman gigs here and there. Not full-time on Bergman, just a sub. And then, I probably work with about 10 or so bands as their second and third calls.
Right.
So just pretty much maintaining that through the end of the year into the next year.
Nice.
I've got a studio in my house that I've been working with some friends, some music buddies, kind of in the compositional stages of working up new songs for a record, and been doing a lot of that kind of engineering stuff. That's a new development, I guess, since I moved back home from San Francisco a couple of years back.
Yeah.
I just wanted more opportunity, more. I wanted to learn something a little bit different, and that's a pretty cool thing. Eventually I'd like to start marketing that as a business and start soliciting record projects and whatever.
Nice.
So that's pretty much, I guess, my 2018 will probably be more hands-on in the studio and just doing my standard gigs. Not speaking a lot these days. That's sort of by choice. It took over my life kind of a lot.
Ready to get back to hitting the skins, brother.
Man, that's what it's about, man. And that's what got me to there in the first place.
Exactly.
So, I couldn't abandon that. I kind of put speaking on the back burner and started focusing primarily on music gigs.
Well, it's good to have you back, man. You're an inspiration and always an awesome dude to talk to. And it's been great to see you throughout the years and experience the Dan Caro story in action.
Thank you, Jody. I appreciate it, man. It was great to catch up with you too, man. And thanks for having me on your podcast.
Thanks for tuning in, and many thanks to Dan Caro for sitting down with me. Talk about a baffling talent and just a truly remarkable story. Jeez Louise. What first world problems are you whining about and crying about today via social media? Your coffee wasn't quite to your liking? Probably pales in comparison to some of the stories you just heard if I had to take a guess. So get out and get to it, people. You can get Dan's book, The Gift of Fire, in stores and everywhere books are sold, so be sure to check that out. It is an incredible story. And keep your eyes peeled for Dan performing either in New Orleans or a town near you. Dude is a badass and a must-see. So thanks again, Dan. Thank you, the listeners. If you have any questions for me, shoot me an email at crashbangboompodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe on either iTunes Podcasts and or my YouTube channel, Crash Bang Boom Podcast. Thanks, and we'll catch you on the next one. Crash Bang Boom!